For some, it's the first steps into a post-Carl world. For others, it's just another day in the land of the dead. It's 6 stories from the apocalypse on this week's The Walking Dead, Season 8, Episode 10, The Lost and the Plunderers. Plunderers. Really? Hey everyone, D here, and welcome to this week's review of The Walking Dead. So yes, of course, spoilers, that's part of what we do here. Alright, interesting setup for this week's episode. I have to say I kind of like it. Certainly is going to make talking about it a little bit easier and more straightforward. But I did kind of like the little focus on different people and what's going on, the different sort of point of view. And we get a little bit of, time jumping back and forth, which was a little bit cool. So let's start things off with, well, where we started off. Michonne's story, really our first steps into our post-Carl world. And I have to say that there's a couple of these little sequences that didn't totally ring with me, and we're going to actually cover those both real quick. First off, this was one of them. First, I almost started getting really mad at Rick when it looked like he was going to leave Carl's gun on his little cross there on his grave marker. I understand, the personal kind of connection there for it. Maybe not necessarily wanting to hold on to the weapon that took his son's life, but this is The Walking Dead. It's still a gun. It's a gun with a silencer. That's like gold. So I was this close to being super mad at Rick. I'm glad that he took it and brought it back with him. Really a smarter choice. I understand the emotions that are going on, and Rick going through these emotions, I think, are a lot of his motivations, a lot of what is happening with him. And again, completely understandable. But that being said, these first moments of the episode really started annoying me. As I had mentioned last week, while I understand, I appreciate the time taken for Carl's exit. And I understand that there's a lot of goodbyes, there's a lot of moments, there's got a lot of ground they had to cover. I also think that that episode went on too long. I think it got dragged out a little bit. And because of that, with the first opening moments of this kind of, milking the whole Carl thing, milking the Carl, no, let's not use that as a phrase, but just dwelling on these moments way too much, I thought was a bit, Michonne tearing up, the whole handprint thing. I mean, again, I understand the emotions that we're going through, but because we had spent so much time pulling this off and still sitting in that mire, just felt like dragging things out. Even the whole, we've got to put the fire out because the structure's burning, what? Because this is where Carl used to hang out on the roof. It's gone. You're wasting your fire extinguishers in a world where these things are not easily available off the shelf. So I was a little annoyed as the episode started out. However, I did appreciate them talking in the car. That's one thing that always annoys me, is like, they do this whole thing and then people get in the car and they're like, well, talk about it when we get there and we've got things we got to do, and then they miss the whole car trip when things can be discussed. So I have to say I appreciate them at least continuing the scene as they got in the car and having those little talking moments. And this is, of course, where you find out about the letters, specifically the letter to Negan, which is going to play up so much. But also Rick's plan to go after Jadis and the rest of the Heapsters there, which I have to say, I don't really agree with his plan on that at all. I'm kind of with Michonne on this. Why, especially in this moment, going after them? It seems like a waste of energy and a way to get oneself back into trouble. Didn't work out that way, but I didn't necessarily think there was a clear plan to begin with. Alright, the other little weak vignette I thought in this episode was the whole Enid Aaron story. Well, I guess the Enid story, as it is titled up here. And this is, look, I was kind of annoyed how things ended up last with them when we last saw them with shooting Grandma in the back. It seemed to me, if you're going there to make a big offering, perhaps initial violence and shooting isn't the right choice to make. And certainly they're paying the consequences in this. And that's really what this vignette is dealing with, is the fallout from that choice. Now, I did like Enid's kind of point of view of saying, look, she made me do it. She put me in a position where I had to kill her. And I would do it again, considering even though if I'm going to feel this way. So it gives us, again, a view into the harshness of this world, of the hard choices we have to make. On the other hand, I still think that that was reckless. And this whole little sequence I thought was just, I was waiting for them to be killed from the beginning. We did have a good, Aaron standing up and kind of making the speech there and talking about how we can't kill, that we have to do this. And you like the idea, we'll go fight them and you can stay here and hide. Not very kind, but it does get people thinking. So there was some of that. It's just, overall, I just thought this was kind of a waste of a sequence. From being captured to just turn around and being let go. I love that the line. Again, there was a couple of nice lines. Letting you go, that is our contribution to the cause. Okay, fair enough. But really where things end up is, what's up with Aaron? Okay, I see him sending Enid off. Maybe she's a trip, an emotional trip for them. You killed Grandma, maybe you shouldn't be here, and I'll continue the negotiations. But he's not going back to camp, and of course he's still trying to get Oceanside there, so is he just gonna like hang out by that tree the whole time? I don't think so. Probably go make a little shack on the beach. I'm kind of curious how that is. So it was just, the whole sequence just felt kind of weird and wasted to me. I thought they were going to be killed from the get-go. Then it's just an argument of, don't kill us, okay, now you're going to let us go. Now we basically return everything back to before we even got here. Before this whole adventure started, and now Aaron's just going to try and reach in on their own. So, I get it. Maybe Ross Marquand has some other stuff to do, and they're just using this to keep his character busy for a while off screen. I don't know, but again, just a weaker section of this. I think it could have, this whole sequence could have just not happened, and it would be fine. All right, and to the good stuff this week, and we'll start things off with, I think, sort of the scene that really started off the real chain of events through this episode, and that is, of course, our Scene of the Week, being Negan's story this week. There was so much great character stuff happening right there, so much power happening as we have Negan and Simon kind of discussing the next steps to make in their plan. But besides the wonderful character stuff that was done in here, I think this was such a great scene in really framing Negan as a sympathetic character. I mean, we've seen a lot of the sympathetic leanings towards Negan throughout this series. We're getting a little bit more of the backstory and the comparisons of what he came into when he sort of started the Saviors. And this is, I think, perfectly sort of frames that. Because we have Simon, who is ready for revenge, ready to go kill, wipe everyone out, take out Hillside, take out the Heapsters, take out anybody that stands in his way. They have crossed the line, boom. And then we have Negan not allowing that. Again, we're thinking as a villain, sure, go, take out the people that stand against you, and it's all done. But Negan is a savior. He saves people, and I think this really laid it down so beautifully as the difference of those two opinions is that, again, while Negan's way is harsh, he doesn't want to kill people. He even says it, killing is the easy way. But that's not what we do. We save people. Yes, he has to get people in line. He has to get people to follow him. But his goal isn't necessarily killing and the power that comes with it. And if you remember his story of how he created the Saviors, that he found the sanctuary and it was run by a whole bunch of bad guys that were really backstabbing and power hungry and all of that. And he put order to them, in a way, put them in control. We saw when the sanctuary was first breached and Negan was trapped up with Father Gabriel there, how things were falling apart inside the rest of the sanctuary, how Simon really couldn't lead things, how he was coming down to that violent reaction to anybody that stood against him. And Negan is the personality that keeps all of that in line. He is the badder dog, but he is bad enough to keep the worst dogs in line. And I think this scene just really spelled that out so beautifully. I mean, it even starts off, I mean, we get that whole talking to Simon about how Alexandria fell and that, you know, Carl had this plan to get us out. I got suckered. Oh, man, that kid's made for the apocalypse. And all I'm thinking is, man, he's going to be so broken up when he hears about Carl. Which he does end up being. And we will get to that. But this whole sequence, again, framing that difference between Simon and Negan, how Negan is, in a way, the good, the best of these villains, of the bad people that are in the sanctuary. And that's something that I think Carl saw, and why he wrote the letter, and why there's that sort of little connection that we'll deal with, was beautifully. And also, I have to say, just from a management standpoint, the fact that Simon, from his position, was free to talk his opinion to Negan. He wasn't just toe the line. Ultimately, yeah, you do what Negan says. But we had Simon with the ability and the freedom to be able to say his position, what he thought, where he even thought mistakes were going on, but he toes the line. And I think that was sort of great, just from a structural standpoint. And you can see that function. The last wonderful bit in this whole little vignette story was when Negan yells at him and gets him, "Do you understand me?" We see that last shot of Carl, or of Simon, and he is literally chomping at the bit. You can see the jaws, like, oh, I want to grab, and yeah, I mean, the phrase chomping at the bit, horse chomping on the bit in the mouth, yeah, that's exactly what it looks like. And it was such a great character choice. Just really, again, from beginning to end, this was just a perfect little vignette and set the framework for everything else that came. Now, Simon's little story was great because we got to see the time jump. We sort of saw what happened with the Jadis group when Rick and Michonne arrived in the beginning. Here we get to see what actually happened. And it was sort of a great continuation from the previous scene because we see how much Simon wanted to go and wipe everyone out, and how much he kind of got put in line and chomping at the bit there. But when he goes down and he's dealing with everybody else, he's ready to go. He's all character. He's all confidence, doing what needs to be done. Does start off the first land about sitting on their dicks or something like that. But, it was great. It was a great showing of, okay, you're second in command. Even if he disagrees with his orders, he's going to do what he is told to do, which was a perfect setup. Doesn't exactly go that way, but that's sort of the wonderful thing about it. And I have to say, and this was another excellent example of it, I love Simon when he is in his character, when he is interacting, when he was going up the hilltop and dealing with Gregory there, and here when he was dealing with Jadis, of his presentation character. Everything's good, and you're lucky, and we've got defense, and we just need a little bit of well, not the remorse part yet, of, apology for what we're doing. I love his giant, grandiose character, really on full display there. And it's great because you can see how that is his disguise for his emotions. He is feeling something else, but he puts on this persona in order to kind of get things done and maybe make a not quite so mean, interactive personality there. Doesn't last that long. I have to say, give it up for Jadis here to try the line, "Oh, we were returning Rick to you." No, we weren't with him. We were bringing him to you, and then you shot at us. Okay, I have to give it up for trying to do the lie. But yeah, then Gregory Simon goes completely psycho, and that's not going to be good. And it really puts up an interesting position, which, again, we'll hit on all of this, of the consequences that it's going to get, because when he gets back to Negan, he's playing off like everything's fine. Just standing in interaction there. Just, that's it. We do our little meet and greet and tell him how it is. There was remorse. Yeah, there was remorse. Man, that was the nastiest. That's gonna be a haunting memory for a while, is there remorse. blam, blam. Oh, just so harsh on Simon's sequence. But he's not telling Negan what had happened. And this is something that is going to bite him on the back, especially when we see that we've got Rick on the radio. And we already know that Rick showed up post all of this interaction and find out what happened with the Heapsters. So at that point, we're really at the point where this is about to blow back into Simon's face. But Rick isn't quite at the place that he needs to be, or more specifically, that Carl wants him to be. Now, one thing that was brought up in this sequence, what I thought was really interesting, was questioning about Jadis, where she came from, what was up with the whole trash. I did enjoy that inquiry, because these are all questions that have been on sort of on our minds also. But we also find some interesting information. Helipad. Solar panels. We haven't seen any of those. Now, we did get the helicopter brief, what is the end of last season? We did get to see the shot. There was implied that the Saviors do have a helicopter. We haven't heard anything about that since. So this kind of piqued my interest. Is this something that Simon's looking as an alternate base, another place to land? I suppose you could land a helicopter anywhere. We got a big enough field. But it does start to ask some interesting questions about the Heapsters place. And that is something that later in the next sequence in Jadis' story that we find a little bit more about. How this was just a giant open space with a bunch of trash everywhere, and this is where Jadis used to come and make art, find pieces to come together. She was an artist before everything happened, which was cool. And I have to say, I loved hearing her speak in a normal voice. That she has that capacity. It shouldn't be long enough that she's lost all of her language skills, but it was such a difference and shocking moment right there. Just sort of hearing that, and that sort of reach out. Now we've got this vulnerable Jadis, seeing how we have all of the rest of the Heapsters now as walkers. Really, it's kind of sad. So, I mean, this whole sequence, we had a couple of interesting moments. And one, we have Jadis speaking normally, finding out that she was an artist, kind of basically built this place, brought all of the trash together so she could use as art and sort of create a new world for her people where they could be different. Okay, noble in its own viewpoint. But, man, Rick. See, this is where things start to fall apart for Rick. I think, is because of his inability to reach out. This is kind of that particular moment, exactly what Carl's talking about, and Michonne sort of hits this on later on, this is where you reach out and help the person that is asking for help. She has lost everything. She has known she's betrayed. She's been betrayed back. Understand Rick's frustration, but this is where some big changes start to happen. Because if she had saved Jadis, this would have changed that whole last story, I think, in monumental ways. We'll get to it in a sec. But before we leave this, I have to say, while our scene of the week was the Negan-Simon sequence, I cannot pass things up without talking about our zombie sausage maker. That was awesome. Dark, nasty, sure, all of that, but this is The Walking Dead. We expect to see these things. But come on, this is the best way to deal with a horde that's ever existed. Lead them to the Heapsters place. It's a maze of all sorts of ins and outs. You can sort of line everyone up. You get a giant horde. You can send them all in. They'll get sort of dispersed throughout the whole garbage heap. You got little areas where the zombies and the walkers can sort of like meander around as they wait their turn. And then you keep the noise going and they just sort of funnel themselves right up into the sausage maker and done. This was the coolest thing that we have seen. Again, nasty, disgusting, certainly not sausage I would want to eat. But the best way to deal with a horde that we have ever seen. It is very straightforward. I'm hoping to see more of this particular machine. And for our final little vignette, Rick's story. A lot of interesting stuff going on with this episode. Of course, this is where we start things off with his kind of remorse about Jadis. I didn't want to kill her. I shot over her head, but she got away. I didn't want her dead. I just wanted her gone. So at least there is remorse. At least he's thinking about that. But this is where Michonne brings it up. Maybe this is what Carl was talking about. And this is why this is so important, especially considering the whole thing that would happen on with Simon and his interaction with Negan right before Rick gets on the radio. Because I appreciated that Rick calls Negan. That he sees the letter, Carl's written a letter to Negan, he reads it, of course he's going to, and he reaches out. And I was hoping this might be something. Now he's not there yet. He wrote your letter, he wanted you to stop, he wanted me to stop, but I'm still going to kill you. And we see where Negan is the stronger character here, because he is right at every point. First off, he says he's sorry to Rick. Man, that kid, I thought that he was make it. He's concerned if he's the one responsible for it, which is what Carl very specifically put on. They didn't do it. It wasn't anything. I was just bit. He reinforced that so that Rick can't blame Negan for this particular act. And Negan doesn't have to take responsibility for this particular act. And by that, he's also right when he turns things around and puts it onto Rick, that this is your fault. That you had to fight, that you weren't there to stop this from happening to your son. Now, Negan is, he's a bad guy, for sure. I know it's not really all Rick's fault, but he does have a point how Rick is making these choices which putting people in danger. He has hit that before. He has talked about how much Rick is going to be responsible for getting people killed. Now, Negan, when you're the one that goes out and kills them, the responsibility is still on you. But he is right in the sense that Rick is acting emotionally. Carl very much wants him to step back from his emotions and see the bigger world, the tomorrow, that the killing just becomes retributive back and forth. Even Enid hit it on when she was talking with Oceanside. Fine, you kill me, then our people are going to come up and they're going to kill you. And maybe you kill some of them, but they'll come enough and then there'll be more killing. That's exactly what's going on here. Rick is reacting emotionally with violence back, and he's just summoning Negan to come back and get him and do this back and forth. If he had thought for a moment about the Carl thing, if he had brought Jadis with him, then when he got on the radio and Negan was talking all that crap about being, you know, the better guy, not being responsible, and Rick being the one that's killing everybody, he could have been able to say, hey, you just took out all these Heapsters. How can you do that? How can you claim some sort of higher ground when you just sort of wiped out all of your enemies? And then, of course, Negan goes, what are you talking about? I didn't want them all killed. What's up, Simon? And then we almost have two people who were bitter enemies almost coming from the same side, that there's almost a point where they could agree and maybe look at things a little bit differently. That was the opportunity that was presented here that Rick missed. And we will see the fallout of this continuing to go forward until Rick is able to step aside and may his mercy, his wrath be overcome by his mercy, or however the line actually goes that he keeps saying, my mercy overcame my wrath. Thank you. So I think that's really the big sequence, because this was a great moment. This was a great back and forth, but we really see how Rick is continuing to respond emotionally. Understandably so, he just lost his kid. But that's not going to help in this situation. And Negan is one person that does not react emotionally. He is very straightforward. There's one great thing about his character is he is honest. He says what he means and he means what he says. He doesn't manipulate, he doesn't mess around, he doesn't with people like that. He's very straightforward. Rick and Negan, if they could work together, that would be kind of an unstoppable thing. They're not going to be able to. Hopefully, I think what this is going to all eventually fall out is that, you know, there'll be some mercy. But I think this was a big opportunity where Rick could have started to turn the tide, and instead is still falling into the same trap that kind of got the place all messed up in the first place, or kind of the failure for the whole counterattack on the sanctuary. All right, things are going along. I'm going to wrap things up here. Do have one quick little question. Is shelf-stable applesauce going to be the new pudding? Just thought about that when Jadis kind of pulled that out. I know it's sitting on the shelf, it's made with preservatives and stuff, but that applesauce did look really good. And all I could think about, of course, was Carl's pudding. Maybe it's the new snack. Anyway, that's it for this week. Now, next week it looks like we have the Alexandrians trying to head to Hilltop, and that sort of seems to be how the rest of the season is probably going to play out. It's much like the first half of the season. It's all going to be compressed over a couple of days. It looks like all of season 8 is probably going to take place over the span of like a week, being all told, maybe a little bit more. So kind of a compressed time, just focusing on the immediate dangers. So I'm guessing we're going to spend the next few episodes getting to Hilltop and then having the battle and then being it all there. But I think it's all going to happen within a compressed time period. Which means, I don't know, maybe by season 9, that's when we do a time jump and we get Old Man Rick. We'll have to wait and see. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me on this little review. If you enjoyed it, please go ahead and hit that like button. Thoughts, ideas, comments, throw those down in the section below. You can always catch me on Twitter and Instagram. I am at Darren Jakes. Subscribe if you're not. It's quick, it's easy. You'll catch all these reviews. I actually just did a big ranking past 25 space movies of the last decade or so. It was a blast over with Mark over Enchantment of Eternity, Don, Willie, and Josh from Geeksiders. So tell you what, I will throw a link up to that right there. I'll throw another cool link right here, and then subscribe button right here. And then it's all in one easy to find place. Anyway, thank you again for joining me. That's going to be it for me. I'm D, and I'm out of here. Catch you guys next time. Bye-bye.